3 months after my daughter-in-law called me a failure at my own grandson's birthday party, my son lost his job, his car, and very nearly his house. And on the same evening that happened, he called me from the driveway of the home I had quietly been helping him, keep not saying a word to anyone asking if I could come over. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind him of a single thing. I just got in my truck and drove. But I'm getting ahead of myself, friends. Let me take you back to where this really started. My name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old, and I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the county. I designed bridges, drainage systems, flood control infrastructure, the kind of work that nobody notices until the day it stops working. I retired 2 years ago with a pension, a paid-off house in the same neighborhood where I raised my kids, and enough in savings to be comfortable without being flashy. I don't drive a luxury car. I don't take expensive vacations. I keep a garden in the backyard. I cook on Sunday afternoons, and I see my grandchildren as often as I'm allowed to. That last part, as often as I'm allowed to, is where the story begins. My son, Nathan, is 38. He works in sales for a mid-sized software company, and for the last 4 years he's been married to a woman named Corinne. Corinne grew up in a wealthier part of the state than Nathan did. Her father was a property developer. Her mother ran a boutique. When Nathan brought her home the first time, she looked around my living room, the same living room where he took his first steps, where we built model trains together every Christmas, where I held him the night his mother passed, and I saw her expression, just for a second. A small, polite smile that said she had already decided what this place was. I told myself I was being uncharitable. People get nervous meeting the parents. I gave her every benefit of the doubt I had. For 2 years, things were manageable. We had dinners, we exchanged gifts at holidays. I babysat my granddaughter Emma and my grandson Caleb whenever they'd let me. I didn't push my way into their lives. I respected their space. I paid for things quietly when they needed it. A car repair here, a medical copay there. Small things I never brought up and never expected back. Nathan knew, and I could tell it embarrassed him sometimes, but he accepted it the way young families do when they're stretched thin. What I didn't fully understand, until that party, was that Corinne did not see any of that as generosity. She saw it as something else entirely. Caleb turned 6 in March. They rented a space at one of those children's entertainment places, the kind with inflatables and arcade games and pizza that tastes like cardboard, and invited about 30 people. Family and friends. I drove 40 minutes to get there, brought Caleb a wooden train set I had hand-painted myself over 3 weekends, and arrived with a smile I meant completely. Corinne's parents were there. Her father, Don, is the kind of man who shakes your hand while already looking over your shoulder for someone more interesting to talk to. Her mother, Patricia, greeted me with the particular warmth of someone who has rehearsed warmth without ever feeling it. I've met the type before. I nodded and found a seat near the kids. It was later in the afternoon when it happened. I was sitting with Nathan's aunt, my late wife's sister, Ruth, and a few others from our side of the family. Corinne was across the room with her parents and a group of her friends. I wasn't paying particular attention until I heard my name. Or not my name exactly, but enough. I heard Corinne say to her mother, clearly not estimating how well sound carries across a room full of children, "He means well. He just doesn't quite understand their world, you know?" Don spent 30 years building something real. Gerald spent 30 years on a government salary fixing ditches. Patricia laughed. A soft, small laugh. Don said nothing, which in its own way was worse. The table around me got quiet. Ruth put her hand on mine. I looked down at my coffee cup. I did not say a word. Nathan was on the other side of the room, and I don't know if he heard. He didn't look over. The party continued. Caleb opened his gifts. He held up the train set, and his eyes went wide, and he shouted, "Grandpa, it's blue!" Because blue is his favorite color, and I had known that, and I had painted every car on that train in exactly the right shade. I hugged him. I sang with everyone. I stayed until the end, helped fold up chairs, and kissed both my grandchildren goodbye. I drove home in silence. Not angry silence. Something older and quieter than anger. The kind of feeling you get when something you suspected for a long time finally gets confirmed in plain language. 30 years on a government salary fixing ditches. That's what I was to her. That's what the pension and the paid-off house and every quiet act of support I had offered their family amounted to in her accounting of the world. Now, friends, let me tell you something about what Corinne did not know. She did not know that the house she and Nathan lived in, a 3-bedroom colonial on a nice street in a good school district, was purchased with a down payment that I provided. $22,000 4 years ago when they were scrambling to make the numbers work. Nathan had asked me quietly, over the phone, if there was anything I could do. I told him yes without hesitation and wired the money the next morning. We agreed there was no need to make it a formal thing. He would pay it back when he could. I never brought it up again. She did not know that I was listed as the emergency contact on their homeowner's insurance policy, or that when a pipe burst in their basement 2 winters ago and caused $9,000 in damage, I was the one who made the calls, navigated the claim, and wrote the check for the deductible because they didn't have it liquid at the time. She did not know that Nathan's car, a 4-year-old SUV he drove to work every day, was on a loan that I had co-signed, because his credit score at the time of purchase wasn't strong enough to get a reasonable rate on his own. She did not know that I had a standing arrangement with their pediatrician's billing office to cover whatever their insurance didn't catch, because the year Caleb was born, Nathan had called me at 11 at night, panicked about a bill, and I had just handled it quietly and asked him not to mention it. I had built a kind of invisible scaffolding around their life, not because I wanted credit, not because I wanted to hold it over anyone, because Nathan was my son, and Emma and Caleb were my grandchildren, and that's what you do when you love people. You make sure the structure holds even when they don't know you're the one holding it. But standing in my driveway that night, engine off, looking at my darkened front porch, I made a decision. I wasn't going to burn anything down. I wasn't going to call Nathan and deliver a speech. I was simply going to stop quietly adding to the scaffolding. I was going to let it stabilize at what it was, and I was going to stop extending any further. No new commitments, no new cosigns, no quiet interventions. Whatever was already in place could stay, but I was done building. More than that, I was going to start paying closer attention to what I had already built, and make sure that when the time came, I understood exactly where things stood. The first thing I did was call my attorney, a woman named Barbara who had handled my estate planning and my pension transition. I explained the situation not emotionally, just factually, and asked her to review every financial arrangement that involved Nathan or his family. She called me back 2 days later with a summary that I had already mostly known, but had never laid out in front of myself all at once. The co-signed auto loan had 14 months remaining, co-signed, which meant that if Nathan missed payments, my credit was affected. I had not thought much about this for years. I thought about it now. The down payment of $22,000 had no formal documentation. It had been a gift or a loan, depending on how you looked at it, and there was nothing in writing. Barbara gently suggested I think about whether I wanted to formalize that. I told her to draw up a simple letter of understanding. Nothing aggressive. Just a document that acknowledged what had happened, so that in the event of any future complications, I did not name what complications I meant there was a record. Nathan signed it without much question. I think he was a little uneasy about it, but he signed. I told him it was just for my estate planning, and he accepted that. 3 months passed. I saw my grandchildren twice, both times at organized family events where Corinne was pleasant to my face, and I was pleasant in return. I brought food. I asked about the kids' school. I did not bring up the party. I did not change my behavior toward Corinne in any visible way. Inside, I had changed, but I kept that to myself. It was in June that Nathan called me on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual. We typically talked on Sundays. "Dad," he said, and I could hear something in his voice before he got another word out. "I got laid off today." His company had restructured. His entire division was eliminated. He had 30 days of severance, and whatever was in his 401 kick, which wasn't much because they'd had to pull from it the year before when Corinne's car needed to be replaced. I listened. I asked him how he was feeling. I asked about the kids, whether they knew yet, whether Corinne was okay. He said Corinne was taking it hard. I imagine she was. I told him the severance gave him time to land somewhere good, that his skills were real and the market for them was solid, that I believed in his ability to navigate this. I meant all of it. I did not offer money. I did not volunteer anything. He didn't ask me for anything either, which told me something about where we were. Over the following weeks, the picture filled in through small conversations. Nathan was applying everywhere. Corinne had gone back to work part-time, something she hadn't done since Emma was born. Their expenses were significant: the mortgage, the cars, the kids' activities. The severance was going to run out before he had something new locked in. He mentioned carefully that the auto loan payment had come up. I said, "I know, Nathan. I've been watching it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm not going to miss it, Dad. I just want you to know I'm aware of it." I told him I trusted him and I'd give him a heads up if I ever saw anything on my end. I also quietly called Barbara again. I told her I wanted to understand exactly what my options were on the co-signed loan in the event of default. Not because I expected one. Just because I believe in knowing where you stand before you need to know. It was a Thursday in late July when Nathan missed the payment. He called me the same day, before I'd even seen a notification. He explained there had been an overlap. He'd moved money to cover the mortgage and misjudged the timing. He was going to catch it up within a week. He was apologetic and clear and direct about it, and I respected that. I told him I wasn't angry and that I understood. That night, Corinne called me. This was unusual enough that I looked at the phone twice before I answered. She was different on the line than she'd ever been with me before. Quieter, a little halted in her speech. She thanked me for being patient with Nathan. She said she knew this was a hard situation. I said, "It's a hard season. Those pass." Then she said something I did not expect. She said, "Gerald, I owe you an apology." I waited. She said she had been thinking about some things she'd said at Caleb's party. That she didn't know for sure if I'd heard, but that she'd been told by someone who had been sitting nearby that her words were careless and unkind, and that she was sorry. She said she had grown up in a world that put too much value on certain kinds of achievement and not enough on others, and she was trying to see that more clearly. It was not a perfect apology. It had some hedging in it, but it was real enough, and she had made herself do something uncomfortable, and I respected the effort. I said, "Corinne, I appreciate you saying that. It did reach me, and I want you to know that I don't hold it against you. I'm not built that way." She exhaled, a long, slow exhale. Then she said, "I don't know how we would have gotten through these last few years without you. I think I understand that now, in a way I didn't before." I told her that was all I ever needed to hear, and I meant it. Friends, here's what I want you to understand. I never went to Nathan and listed out everything I had done. I never sent Corinne a receipt. I never told my grandchildren that Grandpa Gerald was the reason the lights stayed on. I didn't need them to know. I needed them to be okay. But there is a truth that operates underneath the surface of every family, and it is this: the people who do the quiet, unglamorous, structural work, the ones who co-sign the loan and cover the deductible and wire the money at 6 in the morning without being asked twice, those people are not invisible forever. Life has a way of making them visible, not through revenge, not through confrontation, through the simple, patient turning of events. Corinne had looked at my living room and seen a man who fixed ditches. What she hadn't understood yet was that ditches are what keep floodwater from taking everything you've built. Nathan found a new position in early September, a step up from what he'd had before. The auto loan cleared. The mortgage stabilized. I attended Thanksgiving at their home that year and sat at the table and watched my grandchildren argue over who got the drumstick, and it was the best meal I'd had in years. Before I left that night, Nathan walked me out to my truck. He stood there in the cold, with his hands in his pockets for a moment. Then he said, "Dad, I want to say something." I waited. He said, "I know I don't always say it, but I see you. I see what you do and what you've done, and I don't know who I would be or what we would have if you weren't the kind of man you are." I put my hand on his shoulder. I told him that meant more to me than I had words for, and that I was proud of who he was becoming. Not just as a father, not just as a husband, but as a man who was learning to see clearly. He hugged me, a long, real hug, the kind you remember. I drove home under a sky full of stars with the heater running and the radio low. And I thought about my wife, Nathan's mother, who left us too soon. And I thought about what she would have made of all of this. She was a woman who never raised her voice, who believed that your life makes its own argument, if you live it with enough patience and enough care. I think she would have nodded and said, "Gerald, see? Just let it be. I've been letting it be my whole life, friends. Quietly, one bridge at a time." If there is a person in your life, a parent, a spouse, a friend who builds and supports and holds things together without asking for recognition, I want you to hear this. They know more than they say. They see more than they let on. And when the moment comes that you understand what their presence has meant, don't wait to tell them. Don't wait until a payment is late and the scaffolding starts to show. Tell them while the sun is still up. Tell them while there's time for it to land the way it deserves. That's the only thing in this story I would have done differently. I would have told Nathan's mother, while she was still here, just how much every quiet day beside her was worth to me. Everything else, I'd do exactly the same.